Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is the second round recap of the Sinquefield Cup, and today again I am bringing to you the world champion challenger Jan Nepo, and what a worthy challenger he is. Immediately after a painful defeat, he strikes back, and boy, what a strike back this game was against Alireza Firouzja. Let's have a look. This is the game analysis. I absolutely love this game to bits. The opening is going to be actually a Catalan, probably one of the most popular openings on top level, very safe, very solid, and some would even say analyzed to death. But as per this game, we can see that there are still areas where there is room for creativity. It seems like chess is just an endless entertainment for us. So we are going to now go down with this 96 variation, or on that path rather. And as you would expect from these top guns, we are still following theory all the way here. What I really like to point out about this variation is that in many lines, black actually ends up with an extra pawn, but the power of this Catalan bishop is just unparalleled. This is what this whole game is going to be all about until we reach the rook ending phase. Remarkable stuff there. So let's have a look. First, now we notice that after knight d2, b5 is not playable because of the power of the Catalan bishop, and so white immediately recuperates one of the two pawns of deficit. And now we have got an open b file to work with as well, and a noticeable lead in development. By the way, this is where we are going off of the trodden path. Rook b1, queen b3 were the two moves known to theory. Actually, there was a Papaioannou, Greek grandmaster against Hikaru that followed one of these moves, queen b3 or rook b1. However, Nepo instead goes knight e4, and I really like this because this actually is a very principled move when it comes to lead in development, and that is the fact that if you trade pieces when you are ahead in development, optimally you would want to trade your opponent's developed pieces so that they are stuck with the undeveloped ones. This actually gives you a feeling of enhancing your lead in development, because now black well and truly is stuck with what I like to call a back rank fest. Bishop d6 was played. The engine prefers bishop e7, but the differences are extremely subtle here. Rook b1, turning up the pressure on the pawn on b7. f5, the bishop goes back. So the big problem for black here is that there are two moves that black really wants to play. One is just a generic, let's develop the bishop, which can't be done without dropping the second pawn. And the other one is the castles, which also can't be played because of the battery directed at h7. So black is stuck for both. Now this resolves the castling problem. Bishop g2, castles, bishop e3, grabbing another very important tempo on the queen. Queen a5, c4, and this is what I would really like about current absolute top level chess. And I would say that this is a really cool moment to stop here, although maybe a couple of moves later even I can demonstrate this concept even better. And that is the following. Nowadays, the absolute elite is not trying to find opening advantages. And the reason for that is because it's borderline impossible. What instead they are trying to do is to find those positions which according to the engine are equal, but it's very difficult to prove the equality for one side. For example, in this case, according to the engine, with perfect defense, black is completely a-okay. There is no problems here. But it's extremely unpleasant to play this with black. And so that is more of a psychological edge than an objective one on the board, but that's as good as it's gonna get, especially nowadays, especially on, 2750 plus level. And I think that Nepo has chosen here the ultimate awesome opening. So f4, bishop d4, bishop e5. And again, according to the engine, these are best moves for black, but the position we are headed for, in my opinion, in particular, the position right here is a nightmare. Like, you look at this and what you find is there is a bishop that can't move at all. The king side has been actually quite severely damaged by these pawns splitting apart. So not only the pawns themselves quite weak, e6 in particular, but also the king is a little bit more exposed now. On top of that, we have got a marvelous rook on the d file. Another one is ready, another one is ready to come to the d file. It just looks like a superbly easy position to play for white. And it looks to me like an absolute nightmare for black. And additionally to that, if you follow the engine's recommendation, the engine says that queen a2 is the way to keep the equality. And that's a very inhuman move to play when you are so far behind in development and you carry on with picking pawns. That's not really something that humans would prefer to do. And these variations to a human eye just look sensational for black, irrespective of material balance. And indeed, Firouzja here opted to trade down as much as he could, immediately entering this rook ending that is going to be basically the main topic of discussion of today's game. Yesterday I praised Magnus's technique very, very highly, and today we are going to do the same about Jan Nepo, because his way of converting this rook ending was nothing short of spectacular. And this is typically the scenario where I think one can easily fall in love with endgames, even if they didn't like it before, if they actually invest the time to understand how such an endgame by white could be won despite the material balance and an almost entirely symmetrical pawn chain, or pawn structure rather. So what is the reason why white here actually can realistically hope to win this game? The main reason is actually the layout of the pawns on the king side, which allows white a very handy centralization of the king to e4 to highlight the weakness of the e5 pawn, and black in turn completely lacks an identical plan to this. So that's one problem. The second one is that right now it's white to move, and so white gets to jump on both open files, which means that he's going to be the first one to be able to penetrate either here or here, depending on what black chooses to do. So we either take and then go in, or if black takes us, then we will be able to go in again. So we will be the first one to pick a pawn that we would like to target. These two factors combined are the starting point for this rook ending to be clearly better for white. Now, is this enough to win? I think according to the engine and according to best defenses, not. But again, it requires perfect play from black to survive something like this. Let's see how this endgame goes. King g8, very logical, bringing the boss towards the middle. Take, take, and rook d5. Rook d7 may look very attractive to many, but now black also has the same idea coming to the second, and now trying to mow the pawns down. It seems that black gains sufficient counterplay. In contrast with rook d5, if now I come into b2, then after rook takes, this is hanging, so I have to insert this. And after takes, takes, and takes here, we are actually going to enter a very similar rook ending to what we had in the game. So let's just skip this now and move on with what the game had to offer. Rook b4, rook takes e5, rook takes c4. And now we enter the second phase of this rook ending, which is already, by the way, looking very promising for white. Now, why is that? What is the factor here at play that allows us to claim white to be better? The main factor here, again, is in the pawn structure, and that is that white's passed pawn is actually a protected passed pawn. So what that means is that when I advance it, it can always be guarded by a fellow pawn. That means that it can never really seriously be considered as a target. In strong contrast, black's passed pawn is isolated. It can never be protected by a pawn, and therefore it will need constant nursing from the rook. And that is a huge contrast, because what that eventually is going to mean that white's rook is going to gain more activity, because white doesn't have to rely on the power of the rook to defend the passed pawn. Let's see how it materializes in practice. Rook a5, hitting the pawn, rook c6. Terrible passive rook versus beautifully active rook. This is another key factor that you are aiming for when playing rook endings. King g2, king f7. f4, king e7, and e4. Now already you can see that these pawns are advancing together, and they actually hold another huge benefit having the three of them in one bunch together, and that is the fact that you can almost always hide the king somewhere amongst the pawns from the checks, whether they come from the side or whether they come from behind. Let's see what I'm exactly talking about. Rook b6. According to the engine, by the way, this is already a losing move, but very human. Firouzja is looking to activate the rook however, whenever, wherever he can. I don't mind this move at all, although now, to contradict me, he swings back. So this is what we call, by the way, in rook endings and in endings in general, passive defense. When you can't see a way to improve your position, by the way, g6 would have been such, because at least it invites white to trade pawns, which they certainly shouldn't. So instead of, you know, trying to seek counterplay, black here goes like, okay, I will be passing back and forth, show me what you got. Now in rook endings, there are some notable cases where that is the right approach, but generally speaking, the broad consensus is that whenever possible in rook endings, try to seek active counterplay. And that usually means try to attack pawns, try to split your opponent's pawns, try to offer numerous pawn trades. So be active with what you are hoping to accomplish. Now, once again, there are exceptions to the rule, and there are times when passive defense is the only way. But here it seems to me that white has got way too many obvious moves, like f5, king f3, king f4, g4, g5, and so on, just rolling up. You can't just sit there forever and wait. But that's what Firouzja decided to do. f5. According to the engine, a small mistake instead of the correct g4. A very weird claim, because now the check sends the king back, whereas after f5 the king can go up. But apparently now after king f6, king f4, rook c4. No, that's not right. Sorry, g5. Ooh, that's right. No, king g4, rook c4 was the idea. I stand corrected. And now if we take this, c6. Active defense. Note the active defense. We go like, take my pawn, I don't care. a6 is yours, but I wanna attack your pawn. This is textbook how to play good defensive rook ending. King f3, king e5. Look how active the black pieces have become at the cost of a perfectly irrelevant pawn. Like, this is just perfect example of how to play rook endings on the defensive side with the concept of active defense. And by the way, after g4 rook check, I guess the idea would have been to push the pawns up and eventually follow it up with the king if the rook moves away. But this doesn't seem as intuitive to a human as it is to the engine. So f5, king f7, mistaken turn. And now, of course, the king is good to hide amongst the pawns like I told you earlier. And now white is looking like $1 million. King f4, king e7. And now I really like sometimes the way how plans are engineered in endgames is really a delight to watch. So here white wants to play e5, but rook c4 check is just a bummer. Like you just go like, why did you have to do that to me? So in order to avoid this, white just casually slides the rook back to the fourth, still attacking the a6 pawn. This is, by the way, why we call a rook like a rook on a5 an active rook, because it constantly keeps the opponent's rook glued to the defense of the pawn, but it can exert pressure here, and it also can move sideways and backwards whilst maintaining the attack. So it has a lot more wiggle room to do something on top of keeping the pawn under attack, and that's a textbook case. This rook fulfills multiple functions. This one is an attacker and a defender. This one here is a pure defender. It has no other function. That feels like a half rook compared to white's. Rook b6, rook c4. Look at the beauty. Again, defender of the king, attacker of the pawn. King d8, e5. Beautifully rolling up, and this is already game over. Note, by the way, the absolutely depressing passivity of the black pieces here versus that line that I showed you where black sacked the pawn on a6 and the black king ended up on e5. So now you see how irrelevant very often even in endgames material can be. Black would be more than happy to give up much more than just a pawn on a6 here in order to have an active king, but that board has sailed already. Rook b1, like I told you, trying to be active now from behind with the checks. Rook c6. The reason why Nepo doesn't need to worry about these counter checks anymore is because the king can simply walk in front of the pawns where it would be shielded forever, and then it can just nurse the f-pawn in without any problems whatsoever. King f3, rook b5, king e4, very logical chess, and now is the time again to go, you want a pawn? I don't care. Piece activity. It works both ways. I have already modeled it for you for the defense, and now we are going to model it for the aggression, the aggressive side, the winning side, the offense as well. King d5, the plan is plain simple. I want to go here, I then want to go here, and then I want to go pop, 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 and queen. That's the plan. Rook takes g4, king e6. Step 1 accomplished. King c8, not really a move that you would want to play, but there's not much else. If rook e4, which I would consider to do, then the problem is that after rook a6, an additional real ugly comes and creeps into the fray, and that is the mate threat. That is, if there ever was a testimony to the difference to the pieces in activity, in terms of activity, mate threat, hello? Like, wow. And black is immediately dead lost. So king c8 is to try to reactivate the king on this side, but it is just too late to the party. Takes, king b7, rook back. And now we want to put the rook behind the pass pawn. The Tarrasch rule, that the best location for a rook is behind a passed pawn, because then it can help nursing the pawn. Rook g2, king f7. Now the threat is just simply to get a queen, and there is not a lot that can be done. I would like to recommend you here to watch the beautiful technique. So obviously e6 allows the check. So how do we resolve the problem of having the checks on the f-file? Is by playing f6, and after takes on f6, you don't take back. No, no, no. You play e6 and you thank black for creating a shield in front of the king so that now the pawn can march in and the king can never be checked. Actually, ef6, which also wins, by the way, creates quite a bit of a problem for white, because now the technicality of the win is a bit trickier, because I can check the king under the pawn and then I just go behind. It does win, don't get me wrong, but here you need to be clever. You need to find a winning plan. But if you don't take the pawn and just simply push past, this shielding concept, which was already known to us chess players from the very famous game Capablanca, bugger, now I try to show off and I forgot, where he walks his king behind the enemy pawn, shielding his own king, and then the pawn goes in. Almost an identical story. Someone will tell me in the comments which Capablanca game that is. Anyway, long story short, this is completely unplayable. After f6, Alireza tried king c6, clever. Now this pawn can't move, and I can't really go e6 either because of the rook f6 check. But sadly for Alireza, now it is two connected pass pawns. That is a death sentence in almost all endgame types, and this rook ending is no different. And that was the time to throw in the towel. An absolute positional masterpiece by Nepo. Something we don't say very often, by the way, because Nepo's style in general is more geared towards aggression and attack and playing very aggressive chess whenever possible, but it only goes to show that he is definitely a worthy world champion challenger, given what a masterful positional masterclass he pulled off here, adding a rook ending to it, which was just like a virtuoso technique. Absolutely amazing. So I hope you guys liked it. I found this game so instructive and educational. I hope that you learned a thing or two from it as well, and I will be back with round 3 tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, to comment, and to sub, and to super like, and I will be back with more soon. Thank you. Bye.